Well, we are excited to talk with you. What we're going to do here is Brian and I and Bill are going to have a conversation for about 15 or 20 minutes. And we have some questions for you around some of our favorite topics, which include some of the things you've just discussed here. Science education, environmental education, climate change, inspiring people to take action. So we're going to kind of go down that path, and then we're going to open the floor to the audience. So I hope that the audience has been inspired, is thinking hard about the questions you'd like to ask, and you'll have about 15 or so minutes to ask those questions.
Not each person.
Not
each person doesn't get 15 minutes.
But put on your thinking caps and get ready for those in about 15 minutes. So I'll turn it over to Brian, and we'll start.
Great. So I get the privilege of asking the first question. Given that it is National Teachers Appreciation Week.
You spend more time with your teachers than you do with your parents.
Absolutely.
Which is not a bad thing.
And in the GSE, we value high-quality science teaching and teaching in general. And so the first question is, we wanted you to talk about excellence in teaching and your experience with teachers who inspired you to become who you've become.
So I had great teachers. I had just great teachers. Mrs. Cochran, this one remark changed my life. I'm sure she'd be very troubled to hear that it was just the one. But I had Mrs. McGonigal in second grade made an oasis where she made underground water. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. In an aquarium. It was a small one. I mean, there weren't a lot of camels or things. And but the guy, Mr. Lawrence in sixth grade, and Mr. Lang, my physics teacher. But you guys, what I believe all these teachers had in common is a passion. They were into it, right? Even if it's, something as exciting as the square root of -1. They were into it. And that, I think, is what you admire about every teacher. And this is what I tell people. Remember, there was a course at the University of Wisconsin, Teaching as a Performing Art. Yeah, I guess so. And so the teachers that are just excited to be there really change your life. And I went back to my old physics teacher's class a couple of years ago, and he was doing magnetic field around a wire. God, he's so good. I could never express it that easily. Oh well. So it was the passion. The passion, I think, is the key.
Well, clearly, I was actually really inspired by your storytelling ability tonight. I loved how you started us with your family and then kind of wove all that in. You were very masterful with that.
Thank you.
And clearly,
wow, I love you, man. Man.
Clearly, your parents were really inspirational as well. And I think it's interesting to think that teachers are one opportunity to inspire young people. Families are another. So there's this interesting opportunity to have teaching and learning in formal settings as well as informal settings. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about where you see opportunities to kind of connect those two, to connect learning in formal school settings as well as out of school settings.
Cool. I did not set her up for this question.
No,
but back when we had very compelling research back in the 1990s, and about half of what you learn about science you learn outside of the classroom. And now I wonder if it isn't a lot higher than that because of the electric interweb thing. You can get the answer to almost any question. I mean, if you wanted to know the atomic number of strontium, you had to go looking. Now it's in literally the palm of your hand. And that's not that everybody needs the atomic number of strontium. Anyone? I think it's 38. It's the schools. It's going to heck. Anyway, these things allow everybody to get access to all this information, and along that line, it also allows everybody to get access to bad or incorrect information. So what we have to do going forward is get everybody, all citizens, more skilled at sifting through enormous amounts of data. Many facts will be wrong or irrelevant. It's a different skill than learning to use a card catalog and looking up a book. Yeah, and that's not a bad thing, it's a thing. But you cannot underestimate the importance of informal education. I mean, I remember being stung by a bee which is traumatic. Your first bee sting is not cool as a little kid. And my mom put ammonia on it. She had one of those crack the capsule things. And this is the same woman who told my brother and me not to drink the ammonia. Now, nowadays, I'm sure most of you had Windex, there's a few hardcores out there that buy ammonia and use it to clean glass. But back then, people would buy a bottle of ammonia, dilute it with water, and clean glass. And so this stuff that was poison that would kill you, she was putting on my skin. And so that was a great lesson, because it felt better.
Informal learning.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It was outside of the classroom. And then I just remember spending hours watching bees fly and hover and fill up their pollen baskets. It was amazing. And then I read in Ripley's Believe It or Not, you know, that thing in paper. According to aerodynamic theory, bees cannot fly. And I'm like, yes, they can. Just wait a minute. And that was a revelation. Like, not everything grown-ups tell you is true, which apparently is still accurate. So informal, it's at least half of what you learn is outside the classroom. So we want that to be as high quality as possible. Now, when it comes to the Science Guy show, we worked really hard to make what are called learning objectives. And do you guys still use that term?
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is something you can test at the end, right? And so we made those, I believe, as high quality as possible. And then it says on the rules of the road, if you guys, for some reason, some of you don't buy a copy of my book. In there is this document I created back in 1992 and 93. And it was, we hope school curricula follow us. That was in there. And a lot of times they do. How many people have been to class where you watch the Science Guy show instead? I have taught so many classes and I'm honored. Thank you. So we worked really hard on those. And you know, what you want are all the standards you need, but no more, right? All the Common Core ideas you need. Common Core! Everybody was into Common Core until people started talking about evolution, and then it became this old crazy thing. So informal education is really important.
Great.
And you want it to be consistent with classroom education.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to take us back to elementary school. Even though the show's not produced anymore, I can go to a local elementary school and find Bill Nye being shown right now. Part of the issue is that in elementary schools, kind of the tail wags the dog, and by that I mean assessment. We don't assess science until the 5th grade.
When I'm king of the forest,
Please.
Science every day in every grade, including preschool. Every day in every grade. And, you know, the White House has had science fairs the last few years. And the reason that the president and his staff do that is because of the economics. I mean, plus I think he thinks it's cool, but.
Of course.
The economics. Now, this is something that's not going to pay you back as a taxpayer and voter in 4 years. It's going to pay you back in 20 years when students who are in 4th grade now become captains of industry and are running Silicon Valley and so on. And so that's obvious to me and not everybody else is crazy making. So if we can slip in a little science there in the early grades, that's really, because we had very compelling research, and you guys may be way ahead of me on this now. 10 years old is about as old as you can be to get the lifelong passion for science. And I think it's about, and if it's not 10, it's 11, 12. It ain't 17. It's not 24 years old. And I think it's as old as you can be to get a lifelong passion for anything. You know, ask any English major, when do you want to tell stories? Is when they were little kids. And so any artist, when were you working with art? When you were really, really young. And this doesn't mean that we don't need high school math and so on. It just means that we have to, the huge opportunities for teaching kids when they're real young is right there. It's so inexpensive. It just takes that much time. Science every day in every grade. But did you have a question, or did I just go off on something? Sorry.
You got to the way. The big idea for me was, what were your thoughts about how we can get greater access to children at younger ages? Because there's large-scale research that says by 8th grade, children have already made their decision about whether or not they're going to become a scientist.
Yeah,
So,
or just have an appreciation for it. We can't, believe me, you do not want a society of all engineers. I can tell you right now. That would be one drag of a party. How do we do it? I mean, you vote. That's what I tell everybody. If you don't want to vote, would you just shut up and let everybody else who wants to be involved? You know, I don't know if you heard, but this election year has been controversial. And it's hardly over. I just think this year is just a huge turning point for humankind. And I'm not kidding you guys. I'm not, you know, everybody, wherever you're alive, you think that's the biggest doggone deal, right? But I claim that the world would be very different if Al Gore had been elected president. Well, I guess, let me correct that. He was elected president if he had become president. And I will say, my conservative colleagues just love to hate that guy. They just love to single him out as a root of evil. But the world would be different. And this year, with respect to climate change, is another really, really significant year. And if you're a kid and you're not old enough to vote, hassle your parents and make sure they vote. Just ride them. If you want somebody to quit smoking, get the kid to tell the parents to quit smoking. And the parents are just going to have to quit after a while. The kids will nag them till they give up. Yes, we have another question.
Yes, so picking up on that, I'm going to go a different direction than I was planning.
Different from that?
Different from that. I was really inspired by two phrases that you used. So you used the phrase to change the world and joy of discovery.
Yes, the J-O-D.
I loved both of those. And I wanted you to speak a little bit about how you connect those two. How do you connect joy of discovery with this notion of changing the world?
Well, I claim science is the best idea we've ever had. And when humankind comes up with a better idea, we'll replace it through the process we call science. Wait, yeah. So the science starts with an observation. It starts with curiosity, trying to observe something, and then often trying to solve a problem. And so, to me, they're intimately connected. The observation, the reason you want to observe something is to feel that joy of discovery, that curiosity. And I'm sure we've all felt it, that aha moment. I caution, just on a side note, I caution people about where every moment has to be an aha moment. Like, pull back on that. For those of you studying algebra, it sucked for me too, okay? You just got to do it over and over. And I'm always concerned when, walking around San Francisco airport and looking at billboards and everything around here, not every technology is going to be disruptive, okay? Some of it's going to be a little better, disruptive water glass, and I'm sure there is one. I'm sure there is one where you don't have to clean it or it's germ-free or something, but generally, the water glass is going to be like a water glass for some time to come. Don't pressure yourself to always have this amazing new thing. Just incremental advances are good, and every incremental advance, I claim, will give you joy. That's my claim.
And you think that through the joy, then people
then
have
you're
the
going to
opportunity
feel like
change
you can.
the world?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I want to get to the change in the world.
You got to
part.
be optimistic. So if you don't think you're going to do well, you won't. And so after you feel this joy of discovery, do something about it. And I think that together we can change things. And for me, it's all of it. When I found out about the Solutions Project, I went, this is the coolest thing I've ever heard of. My goodness. And I don't know, you guys have been out to Palm Springs, I'm sure, but when you get out to Iowa, the wind turbines are taller than the Statue of Liberty. They're way taller than the Washington Monument. They're bigger, the tip to tip of the blades is wider than a 777 airplane. They're just huge because people are thinking big, and that to me is inspiring. So I just feel the joy of discovery every day, and I feel we can change the world every day. Did I do it? Did I connect them?
Yeah.
It's all of a piece for me.
That's great. Thank you.
It's of a piece. One thing. Brian, sir.
So I want to ask about communicating science.
Never thought about it.
Part of my research and my years as a teacher, I think one of the challenges is being able to communicate science in a way that people can understand it and not be intimidated by it. I think that's one of your greatest gifts is your capacity to communicate. So I believe personally that it's something that can be learned. So can you talk about the role of communication in teaching science?
Yes. No, I didn't write this joke. It's a Steve Martin joke. It's an amazing joke. The important thing as a comedian is language. You have to express yourself. People who don't have a way with words, who can't express themselves, sort of have way, I guess. God, that's a great joke. Anyway, so I would say to everybody, try to think clearly about what you want to get across. Try to phrase the learning objective. You know, I'm a native speaker of English, barely, but try to phrase what you're going to get across exactly. When you get clarity of thought of what you're going to say or express or get across, then I think you can create demonstrations to show that or experiments to show that. And I cannot say this enough. In science education, you have to show then tell. It's just seems so much easier just to tell rather than show. But you got to show then tell. That's why in this presentation I do what I can to not have words. I mean, I use words all the time. I think in words. But if you put words on a screen, then people are looking at that, with a couple exceptions. So the other thing I would say, I'm reluctant to use the word hate. But when people say dumb it down, it just makes me crazy, or crazier. You don't want to dumb it down. You want to empower, enlighten, show the concept or the idea. You want everybody to feel that joy of discovery. And so I can't say enough good things about getting clear learning objectives. Now, it's a lot harder than it looks, you know. You try to get every word just right. It's very difficult. But it's worth it, because then it enables you to leave things out. You can go off on some tangent. What did I say, strontium? I could have said rubidium and gone through this whole thing, which is really interesting. But instead, you want to have clarity of what you're going to get across. I still work really hard on that. And when I watch, have you ever seen Frames of Reference? The physics film where the guy's hanging from the ceiling?
Sounds great.
I'll never do anything that cool. I just got to let it go. It's 3 minutes that will change your life. The guy's talking to you, he's got a pipe, he's trusted, he's explaining to you what's going on, then the other guy walks in the room on the ceiling. And he says, "You're upside down." No, he's the one who's up, they have Canadian accents. He's the one who's upside down, isn't he? And then it's like, it's changed my life. I'll never do anything that cool. That's all right, I will strive for it. Because what they wanted to get across, they got across instantly. In physics especially, where you are relative to the universe matters. Very easy to get the wrong answer. And that I found very compelling. Yes, we have another question, sorry. Is it time for audience time?
It is almost time for the audience. I have one burning question I would love to end, which is, in my research group, we focus a lot on thinking about getting people engaged in environmental action, environmental behavior. And I think one of the real challenges is that there are times when we've done studies and done surveys in the Bay Area asking people about their environmental concerns. And we've had a 1,200 person survey, we had 40% of people in the Bay Area say they had no concerns about the environment.
That's fine, don't worry about it, everything's cool.
So I'm interested in thinking, you know, how do you share with people what the concerns might be without scaring them, and yet also inspire them to take action, kind of striking that balance between getting people engaged and excited and interested in the issue without scaring them? Well,
being a little scared's not bad. I hearken to my parents, they're freaking terrified. World War II, they were terrified. But the denial community has worked so hard to say your alarmist behavior or attitude is inappropriate, but actually maybe it's not. But a strange thing that's really hard for all of us to grasp, I still wrestle with this, every single thing every one of us does affects everybody in the whole world. No way, and I have to say way, because of the air. We all share the air. There's no getting around it. And so every time you produce more carbon dioxide than you should have or could have, you're affecting everybody. With that said, doesn't mean everybody should be walking to work and living in tents. Instead, we just have to find ways to do more with less, to take the resources we have and do a great deal more with them, which we can do. And so it's another thing where it reminds me, have you ever known anyone who quit smoking?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Very, very few people just quit smoking, right? It takes some years. Quitting smoking is easy. I've done it hundreds of times. I never smoked, but I've watched people, and it just takes a long time. The first time someone exposes you to the ideas that the air is shared by everybody, oh, that's interesting. The world's getting warmer. Oh, interesting. Glacier National Park is now Rocky Hillside National Park. It takes people many, many repetitions. So you can't, as in science education or in environmental education, you can't get discouraged or give up. It takes, in my opinion, it takes repetition, and after a while people will get it. And I say this all the time about what writ large we call skeptical or critical thinking, skeptical thought. The first time you hear somebody tell you that walking on fire does not take spiritual preparedness, does anybody walk on fire? You know, I don't know if you've ever done it, but people will sell you on the idea that their life coaching will enable you to walk on fire. But the fire pit might be about as big as this carpet. In fact, this is a little long. If you ever do walk on fire, first tip, go pretty fast. Second tip, they'll wet the area around the fire down with a hose, telling you they don't want the fire to spread. But then you get a layer of water on your feet. And that water has to turn to steam, and that takes a lot of energy. And then the third thing is your foot has a lot of meat. If you don't believe me, wrap a Post-it note around an empty pop can or beer can and hold a match under it. The Post-it note won't burn because the heat goes right through the paper into the can. In the same way, heat goes right through your feet. So if you want to walk on fire, go like this. Wow, I did it! Wow! Yeah, but it's not magic. It's science! Yes! It's science. The first time you tell somebody that that guy you just paid $150 to is taking your money and not doing anything magic, they don't believe you. But after a while, you let it soak in or cook in, warm up, they'll come around. In the same way, climate is changing, people. The climate is changing. The ocean's getting bigger. Now, in San Francisco, we have steep hillsides. And so as the ocean gets bigger, it's maybe not as noticeable. But you look at the salt marshes south of the Bay Bridge, the water's getting higher. And by the ocean getting bigger, it's making it rise. You know, we had the first U.S. climate refugees from, I'm not native to Louisiana, but they say island of Jean Charles, Dijon Charles, Ile de Jean Charles. And so people had to leave this island. It's a suburb of New Orleans, but the water, whoa, can't live there anymore. As I tell everybody, it's not the Statue of Liberty is going to be knee deep in water. There's going to be this much water on the floor in Norfolk, Virginia, and Miami Beach, and people are going to leave. And where are they going to go? And who's going to pay for it? Wah, wah, wah. I think it's time for the questions from the audiences.
I'm hearing perseverance.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we're going to segue into questions and answers from the audience. So we have 4 of our fabulous graduate students out there with microphones.
So we do not have 2 turntables, but we do have a microphone.
We do have microphones.
Yes, we have 2 microphones. Older reference lost on some of the younger listeners.
Anthony,
So this is the first question. Brian, take it.
Anthony, we'll start with you.
Well, you know everybody.
Bill, I just want to thank you for your wonderful presentation. And as a master communicator, I want to hear your rebuttal to a statement all over the news right now made by one of my less favorite people. He's one of the 2 presumed competitors for our presidency.
I heard that's going on this year, isn't it?
Yeah.
Haven't heard a thing about it.
His statement was, the only global warming I'm concerned about is nuclear holocaust, which, as we know, would be nuclear winter.
Well, it would be real warm for a while, yeah. No, so you guys, a nuclear exchange, as it's called, would just end the world. I mean, if you like to worry about things, that's a good one. But this is what I say, by the two things. First of all, if you don't want, I presume it's that guy, if you don't want him to be president, vote so that he doesn't become president. I'll say three things, and then to quote Bill Maher, if you go to the restaurant and they're out of the fish, you got to have the chicken. You're not just going to leave hungry. You got to pick one of them. Then the other thing I would say, let us not be surprised, everybody, that after the Republican convention, that the Republican candidate for president and all the way down the ballot embraces climate change. Don't be surprised, because they need enough votes, especially from millennial voters. I'm not an expert on voting districts, but I've done rudimentary analysis looking online, the available information about how many people vote in each state. And I don't think anyone can quite get elected without millennial people, 18 to 32 kind of people, 25 to 32 people. And so if those people are going to vote, in general, they're going to vote in favor of climate change. They're concerned about climate change.
In favor of addressing climate
change. Yeah, thank you for correcting me. Science guy ends career with offhanded remark.
We won't tell.
Yeah, no, everybody, God, it's recorded, it's already tweeted. It's been 10 seconds. No, people who are concerned about climate change are, very, very few climate deniers are young. Climate change deniers are almost universally of a certain age, older age. And so I think, don't be surprised if after that convention, after that's all shakes out, everybody's talking in a constructive way about climate change. So we'll see. Vote, everybody, vote. Yeah, lead on.
We'll start there.
Hello, thanks for being here tonight. You mentioned the Planetary Society, and you asked how many people were members of that society, and very few people raise their hand.
But you could change that,
yeah,
planetary.org.
How can we join, and is it expensive?
No, it's $37.
I'm just a teacher, what?
$37.
A year? Or?
Yeah, a year, yeah. So,
a month?
No, a year.
Thank you, Bill.
And wait, there's more. So, you guys, we had an extraordinary thing happen at the Planetary Society. We got somebody who joined online, and this person watched us for a year and a little bit, and gave us $4.2 million, which I know doesn't go as far as it used to. I mean, you guys are teachers, I'm not telling you, you rake it in. But this transformed the organization, so this coming year we're going to have all these curriculum materials. And my claim is, with me in charge, they're going to be useful. You know, the big thing, I don't know if you guys fight this thing, fat notebooks, where you just get these amazing, NASA is notorious for this, these amazing, cool things, but there's so much stuff you can't deal with it. So stay tuned, planetary.org. I love you, man. Well, man. Yeah, cool. No, consider joining. So what you guys, the next thing we're really working hard for is to get a mission to Europa. Europa is the moon of Jupiter with twice as much seawater as the Earth. It is very reasonable that there is something alive under the ice, and the ocean is kept liquid by the gravitational exercising or squeezing of it going around Jupiter. You can see Europa with a conventional telescope, or if you're real steady, with a pair of binoculars. And so if we were to find evidence of life there, I mean, it would change the world. It would change the way everybody thinks about being alive on Earth. It would change everything. I'm not saying we'd all start driving, on the other side of the street. Well, not everything. but it would be profound, like Copernicus, Galileo. It would just be amazing. And don't tell me Copernicus didn't affect you. You're all wearing stuff and drinking stuff made in other parts of the world, and that got here enabled by navigation on the trackless ocean. Don't come running to me. All right, yeah, lead on.
Question here? Oh,
In the balcony?
we can't see
We
it.
can't see you.
Well, go ahead, boost it.
I'll take your credit for it.
Well,
Whoever's up there
somebody
on
in
top.
white with stripes? Well,
Yes.
belt it out. Let them hear you outside. Blow the roof off the
Can
dump.
you hear me? Oh, okay, there we go. Okay, so I have a question about learning teaching and producing cognitive shifts. So let's say you were talking about the necessity of repetition, that is relying on time for people to change their opinions and consider the facts, understand the facts, and come to terms with the reality. But if we don't want to rely on time taking its effect, if we want to create programs that are going to really help people change their minds about, for example, climate change or other environmental issues, what would you say are the necessary, are the elements that need to be kept in mind from the pedagogical point of view, especially when it comes to outside of classroom education? Excuse me. Because of the fact that usually outside of classroom or non-formal education, you get information in bits and pieces. You watch something cool on YouTube and you learn a little bit of something from physics, but you don't necessarily have other knowledge to connect that piece of information with. So what are your thoughts on helping people process information and change their minds about it?
So I say all the time, you know, I made a television show and so on. It's got to be entertaining first. No, your show is a science show. It's got to be entertaining or nobody's going to stick with it. And as far as the disparate sources of information, that's just the way of the world right now. That's just how it's going to be from the rest of my life. Information comes from all different directions, and we want students to learn to process it. When it comes to climate change specifically, the learning objectives for me are the atmosphere is thin. We all share it. There are 7+ billion people burning it and breathing it. And another fundamental idea that's really important, I mentioned earlier, is when things get warmer, they get bigger. The ocean's getting bigger. And that's got huge economic effects because half the people in the world live on the ocean, seacoasts. So embrace it, man, woman. It's all gonna, information's gonna come from all different directions. We just want the message to be consistent. That's my opinion. And once again, it's correct. Huge advantage.
Can I add something to your opinion? Is that
Please.
possible? Maybe I'll add your opinion to your opinion, which is the other thing I heard from what you said earlier that I thought was really inspiring, is that we can actually do something about it as well. I mean, it's that piece of kind of feeling the self-efficacy, that we all have a role to play in this. So it's not only sharing the facts, but also sharing with people what they can actually do to address these problems.
So how many people, we're in Silicon Valley area, how many people do not drive an electric car? Anyone? Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. What we want to do is electrify ground transportation. And I'll tell you, as a guy who's driven all kinds of electric cars over the years, because they set me up for a few weeks at a time. After you have an electric car, you'll never go back. You'll never go back. And you'll say, electric cars, we can't possibly do that. The infrastructure can't sustain all those wires, so we should give up and run in circles screaming. No. The longest journey starts with a single step. And so if we make in the example of electric cars, if we make electric cars, then as the electricity is produced more and more renewably, as retire more and more coal-fired or fossil fuel-fired plants, the electrons are the same. They don't know any better. They show up renewably or fossil fuelically, and your car runs fine either way. Excuse me. And I'll remind your students, and those of you who teach students, if you can invent a better battery, slightly better battery, or a significantly better battery, not only will you contribute to saving the world for humans, you'll get rich! So let's get her done. Let's go.
Hi, you mentioned that it's really important to get students involved and interested in science at an early age. I remember growing up, I was interested in science, and I remember watching your show and thinking, oh, that's really cool. But there were, like, my family was struggling with my dad being unemployed, and then I had family in Peru that was struggling with violence and crime, and I just remember thinking that science wasn't necessarily for me because there were all these other issues that were really pertinent and I was struggling with. And I was just thinking that a lot of times the message about science is that it's cool, and what's really lost is that science can impact people in meaningful ways, especially underserved communities. And I don't think that message is necessarily put out there enough, especially with climate change, which I think does impact underserved communities.
Oh man, low-income people are affected much
ways.
more directly than wealthy people.
Right, so what do you think is being done to address that and to make sure that issues like climate change are being talked about in the context of not just like America and first world countries, but the global community as a whole, and what can be done to further that conversation?
Well, you know, 193 countries showed up in Paris, and that does not solve the problem. As my colleague Dan Miller says, it's like we've taken our foot off the accelerator, but we're still headed to the cliff. And so we have to do everything all at once. That's what I always say. Science is one more thing you got to do along with addressing violence and social injustice. But technically, the reason I became an engineer, along with watching bees, and I thought bicycles were the coolest thing. You could go anywhere on a bike. But the three things we want for everybody in the world are clean water, reliable electricity, and access to information, access to what right now we're calling the internet. Who knows what the next version of it will be. So if everybody's working to those common goals in everything we do, then maybe we'll get there. But man, you're asking some tough questions that I do not have the answer for. But if we had science every day in every grade, and it were part of your everyday classroom experience, we would embrace it and use it. You know, what I like to say about engineers is we use science to solve problems and make things. And if we have more people who at least support engineering, we're going to have, I hope, I believe strongly, a more productive world. Along that line, the way to reduce the world's population and have more resources for the people who are here is to raise the standard of living of women and girls. And right on. Well, it's not that controversial, people, because when girls grow up to be women and get educated, they have fewer children who are more wanted, and they have more resources for the kids they do have. And by the way, if we educate women and girls to embrace science and engineering, then we'll have right around twice as many brains to solve these problems. So let's go. So as I say, there's no one thing. We got to do it all at once. Okay.
So this is going to be our last question.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Anthony?
This better be good, man. Whoa, man. I can't see. Very important. Yeah.
What's your favorite science joke?
My favorite science show? Oh, those are your daughters. What's my favorite science show? Science joke. Oh, my favorite science show. Well, you know, I came of age with the space program and stuff, so I went in mechanical engineering, which is almost all physics. It's classical physics, regular old physics. So yes, I respect hilarious chemistry jokes. What do you do with a dead chemist? You bury him, thank you. But still, as hilarious as it gets is when the proton asks for how much the beer is, and hold it. See, that's the problem. The bartender obviously is a proton, and the neutron comes into the bar and asks bartender, how much for a beer? And the proton says to the neutron, for you, there's
No charge.
yes! 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 I apologize because that joke is funny to me every single time. And this is where, you know, you go up to Grandpa and he does the same thing with which pocket is the gum in. And I'm sorry. It's still funny to me. Thank you all very much. Thank you guys. Thank you. Nicole. Thank you, Brian. That was great.